Jake Morrison stood in the armory of the Horizon's Edge, his hands still shaking from the battle. Blood and dirt covered his uniform. The fight had been brutal. 3 hours of constant combat to protect the Varani colony on Theta 7. They had won, but the cost was heavy. 15 humans were dead. 23 more were wounded. Jake had carried 2 of them himself to the medical bay. One of them, a young man named Chris Webb, had died in his arms before they reached the doctors. Chris was only 22 years old. He had talked about his family back on Earth just that morning. Jake was washing his hands in the sink when he heard footsteps behind him. He knew those steps. Commander Lyra had walked beside him for 8 years. She was Varani, tall and elegant with silver skin that seemed to glow in the ship's lights. Her people valued honor above everything else, Jake, she said. Her voice was cold. He turned around. Lyra, her face was hard. He had never seen her look at him like this before. They had been friends. They had fought together, eaten together, laughed together, but now her eyes held something different, something that made his stomach feel heavy. We lost 40 Varani soldiers today, she said. I know, Jake replied quietly, and we lost 15 humans. Good people, Lyra repeated. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your people threw themselves at the enemy like animals. No strategy, no thought, just charging forward to die. Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. We saved the colony. We saved thousands of Varani civilians. You did what you were meant to do, Lyra said. She stepped closer. Do you know what the council says about humans, Jake? Do you know what we really think of your kind? He said nothing. Part of him didn't want to hear this. Part of him had always feared hearing it. You are weapons, Lyra continued. Her words came fast now, like she had been holding them back for too long. Disposable weapons. That is all humans are to the Coalition. You throw yourselves into every battle because you are too simple to understand what you are dying for. You think you are partners? You think you are equals? Each word hit Jake like a physical blow. He had served the Coalition for 8 years. He had bled for them. He had watched friends die for them. And now this, we pity you, Lyra said. Her voice was quieter now, but somehow that made it worse. The other species, we all pity you. You are like eager dogs so desperate for approval that you will do anything. You mistake servitude for friendship. You think because we let you fight beside us, that makes you one of us. Jake's hands gripped the edge of the sink behind him. His knuckles turned white. The truth is simple, Jake. Humanity's only value to the Coalition is your willingness to die. You breed fast. You recover fast. And you are so proud of your sacrifices that you never stop to ask why you are always the ones making them. Stop, Jake said. His voice was barely a whisper. No, Lyra said. You need to hear this. Today I watched your people die for mine, and do you know what I felt? Relief. Relief that it was humans dying and not Varani. Because you can be replaced. Your lives are cheaper than ours. That is the truth that no one wants to tell you. The armory was silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Jake looked at Lyra. Really looked at her. He searched for some sign that she didn't mean it. Some hint that this was grief talking, that she would take it back, but her face showed nothing. No regret, no uncertainty, just cold certainty. Something inside Jake broke, not with a dramatic snap, but quietly. Like a rope that had been fraying for years finally giving way. He had wondered sometimes. In the dark hours after battles, when he couldn't sleep, he had wondered. Why were humans always on the front lines? Why were their casualties always the highest? Why did the Coalition give the most dangerous missions to human units? He had told himself it was because humans were brave. Because they were skilled. Because they were trusted with the important work. But maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe Lyra was right. Maybe they were just the ones the Coalition could afford to lose. Jake pushed away from the sink. He walked to his locker without saying a word. Lyra watched him, her expression unchanging. He opened the locker and began removing his armor. The chest plate came off first. He had worn it in 50 battles. It was scratched and dented, marked with the evidence of 8 years of service. He set it carefully on the bench. What are you doing? Lyra asked. Jake didn't answer. He removed the shoulder guards next, then the arm plates. Each piece came off slowly, deliberately. He had put this armor on thousands of times. It felt strange to take it off now, knowing he would never wear it again. Jake, answer me. What are you doing? The leg armor came off. Then the boots. Jake stood there in his basic uniform, feeling lighter than he had in years. Maybe too light, like something important was missing. But that feeling would pass. He reached into his locker and took out his service pistol. He had carried it for 8 years. It had saved his life more times than he could count. He set it down next to the armor. "You cannot just walk away," Lyra said. There was something in her voice now. Uncertainty, concern. Jake didn't care enough to identify it. He took off his rank insignia. 8 years of promotions from lieutenant to lieutenant commander. He had earned each promotion with blood and sweat. They meant nothing now. He placed them on top of the armor. "Jake, stop this." I was angry. "The battle was—" "You were honest," Jake said. His voice was calm. That surprised him. He thought he would be angry, but he just felt tired. "Maybe you said it cruelly, but you were honest. And I am grateful for that." "Grateful?" "Yes." Jake closed his locker. He took one last look at the armor, at the weapons, at all the symbols of his service. "You showed me something I should have seen years ago." He walked toward the door. Lyra stepped in front of him. "Where are you going?" "Home," Jake said simply. "You have duties. You have responsibilities. I have been responsible for long enough." He stepped around her. She didn't try to stop him again. Jake walked through the corridors of the Horizon's Edge. Crew members nodded to him as he passed. Some tried to speak to him, but he kept walking. He went to the captain's office and submitted his resignation. The captain of Irani named Court tried to convince him to reconsider. Jake refused. Within 2 hours, he was on a transport heading back to human space. He sat by the window and watched the Horizon's Edge grow smaller in the distance. 8 years of his life were on that ship. 8 years of friendship and sacrifice and belief. He had believed he was making a difference. He had believed he was protecting something important. He had believed he was respected. Lyra's words echoed in his mind. Disposable weapons. Eager dogs. Lives that are cheaper than ours. Jake closed his eyes. He didn't feel angry anymore. He didn't feel sad. He just felt empty, like someone had reached inside him and removed something essential. The transport jumped to faster than light speed, and the Horizon's Edge disappeared from view completely. Jake Morrison was going home. The transport docked at New Haven Station 3 days later. Jake stepped off with only a small bag containing his personal belongings. Everything else he had left behind. New Haven had changed. When Jake left 8 years ago, it was barely more than a collection of prefab buildings and hopeful farmers. Now it was a real colony. Tall buildings reached toward the sky. Streets were filled with people and vehicles. The air smelled like growing things instead of recycled oxygen. Jake stood on the landing platform and just looked. He had spent so long in sterile ships and military bases that he had forgotten what a living place looked like. "Jake," he turned. A woman was running toward him, her brown hair flying behind her. Amy. His little sister, except she wasn't little anymore. She was 26 now, a grown woman with confidence in her stride. She crashed into him with a hug that nearly knocked him over. Jake hugged her back, and for the first time in days he felt something other than emptiness. "You didn't tell me you were coming," Amy said, pulling back to look at him. Her smile faded. "What happened?" "You look terrible." "I am fine," Jake said automatically. "Liar." Amy took his bag. "Come on. You are staying with me and you are going to tell me everything." She lived in a small apartment above her medical clinic. It was cramped but comfortable, filled with plants and books. Amy made him sit down and brought him food. Real food, not the processed rations he had eaten on ships. "So?" Amy asked, sitting across from him. "Why are you here?" "I resigned," Jake said. Amy's eyebrows rose. "After 8 years? Just like that?" "Just like that. Why?" Jake picked at his food. How could he explain? How could he tell her that 8 years of his life had been reduced to a single truth? That he was just a disposable weapon? "I needed a change," he said finally. Amy stared at him. She had always been able to read him too well. "That is the worst lie you have ever told me. But fine. You do not have to talk about it yet. Just promise me you are not in trouble." "I'm not in trouble." "Good." Amy stood up. "Get some rest. We will figure everything else out tomorrow." Jake slept for 12 hours straight. When he woke up, sunlight was streaming through the window. Real sunlight from a real star. He lay in bed and just felt the warmth on his face. In 8 years, he had forgotten how good that felt. Over the next few weeks, Jake tried to build a new life. He got a job at the spaceport doing maintenance work. It was simple labor, fixing ships and hauling cargo. No one knew he had been a decorated officer. No one cared. They just needed someone who could follow instructions and work hard. Jake found that he liked it. There was something peaceful about simple work. No life or death decisions. No soldiers depending on him. Just tasks that had clear beginnings and clear ends. He made friends too. Ben Carter ran a small shop near the spaceport that sold tools and supplies. He was a big man with an easy smile and a laugh that filled the room. His wife Lisa was quiet but kind. She reminded Jake of his mother. "You are new here," Ben said one day when Jake came in for supplies. "Fairly new," Jake agreed. "What brings you to New Haven?" "I needed a fresh start." Ben nodded like that made perfect sense. "A lot of folks come here for that. This is a good place for fresh starts. No one cares who you were before. They only care who you are now." Jake found himself spending evenings at Ben and Lisa's house. They would have dinner together, and Ben would tell stories about the early days of the colony. Lisa would laugh at his exaggerations. It was normal. It was simple. It was everything Jake's life had not been for 8 years. But at night, alone in his apartment, Jake would lie awake and think. He thought about the soldiers he had served with. He wondered if they were alive. He thought about the missions he used to run, and whether anyone else was doing them now. And he thought about Lyra's words. Even now they hurt. Not because they were cruel, but because they might be true. Meanwhile, back on the horizon's edge, things were not going well. Commander Lyra stood in the tactical room, staring at reports. A supply convoy had been ambushed last week. Without Jake's usual security measures, they had lost 3 ships. A diplomatic meeting with the Zenthari had fallen apart. Jake had always maintained good relationships with the Zenthari traders. Without him, the negotiations failed. Small things were going wrong everywhere. Things that Jake had quietly handled for years. No one had realized how much he did until he was gone. Captain Court called Lyra to his office. He was not happy. "Where is Morrison?" Court asked. "He resigned, sir." "You approved it." "I approved it because you told me it was necessary," Court said. His silver eyes were hard. "What did you say to him, Commander?" Lyra felt uncomfortable. "I expressed concerns about the human casualties in the Theta 7 battle." "Expressed concerns?" Court leaned forward. "I have been speaking with other crew members. They tell me you said some very harsh things. They tell me you called humans disposable weapons." Lyra said nothing. "Did you say that?" Court demanded. "I was grieving. We lost many Varani soldiers that day." "We lost fewer Varani soldiers because of Morrison and his people," Court said. "He saved that colony. He saved thousands of Varani civilians. And you repaid him by telling him his people are worthless." "I did not say worthless. I said, I know what you said. Other people heard you." Court stood up. "Jake Morrison was one of the finest officers on this ship. He served with honor for 8 years. He earned multiple commendations. He saved countless lives, and you drove him away with your cruel words." Lyra felt shame creeping into her chest. She had been angry. She had been grieving. But maybe she had been wrong. "Find out how to contact him," Court said. "We need him back." But contacting Jake was harder than expected. He had not registered a permanent address. The Coalition's messages to him went unanswered. It was like he had disappeared completely. Back on New Haven, Amy finally confronted Jake one evening. They were sitting on her small balcony watching the sunset. "Are you going to tell me what really happened?" she asked. Jake was quiet for a long time. Then slowly he told her everything. About the battle. About Lyra's words. About realizing that maybe humans were not seen as equals in the Coalition. Amy listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "So you walked away," she said finally. "Yes. Because someone said something cruel. Because she told me the truth," Jake corrected. "Did she?" Amy turned to look at him. "Did she tell you the truth, or did she tell you what she believed in a moment of pain and anger?" Jake frowned. "What is the difference?" "The difference is everything." Amy leaned back. "Jake, you spent 8 years with these people. You fought beside them. You saved them. Do you really think all of them see you as disposable?" Lyra said what she said. But Lyra is one person. One person who was hurting and angry and said something terrible. Amy looked at him seriously. "Did any other aliens treat you like you were worthless?" Jake thought about it. Captain Court had always respected him. Tyel, the young Varani soldier he had saved 2 years ago, still sent him messages sometimes. The Zinthari traders had always greeted him warmly. Even Commander Lyra before that day had treated him as a friend. Some people might have thought those things, Amy continued, but I bet most of them did not. I bet most of them saw you as exactly what you were. A good officer and a good person. Maybe, Jake said quietly. You walked away because someone hurt you, Amy said. That is understandable. But make sure you walked away for the right reasons. Do not let one person's anger define how you see yourself. Jake did not answer. He watched the sun sink below the horizon and thought about what his sister had said. On the horizon's edge, Lyra finally managed to get a message through to New Haven. She recorded it carefully, choosing each word. Morrison, this is Commander Lyra. The Coalition requires your consultation on urgent tactical matters. Your expertise is needed. Please respond. It was formal. Cold. Nothing like the friendship they once had. Jake received the message the next day. He read it once, then deleted it. He was done being needed. He was done being useful. He was done being the one who could be relied on to sacrifice everything. He went to work, fixed some ships, and tried not to think about it. The news came 3 weeks after Jake deleted Lyra's message. He was at Ben's shop when the emergency broadcast appeared on every screen in New Haven. This is a coalition-wide alert. A hostile species designated as the Kraith has entered coalition space. Multiple worlds are under attack. All citizens should prepare for potential evacuation. Jake stared at the screen. The images showed ships unlike anything he had seen before. They were organic, almost alive, with surfaces that pulsed and shifted. The broadcast showed footage of battles. The coalition fleet was losing badly. What are those things? Ben asked, his face pale. Jake's military training kicked in automatically. He studied the images, analyzing their tactics. The Kraith fought in swarms, overwhelming their enemies with numbers. They used biological weapons that ate through ship hulls. Traditional coalition tactics were failing. They are trouble, Jake said quietly. Over the next few days, the news got worse. The Kraith had attacked 6 worlds simultaneously. 3 had already fallen. Coalition forces were in full retreat. Casualties were in the thousands. Jake tried to ignore it. This was not his problem anymore. He had left that life behind. But every night, he found himself watching the news broadcasts, seeing the names of the dead scroll across the screen. Some of those names he recognized, people he had served with, people he had trained, people he had considered friends. Then came the broadcast that changed everything. The Kraith had attacked the Varani homeworld. Lyra was there, leading the defense. Jake watched the footage. The Varani were fighting desperately, but they were outmatched. The Coalition had sent reinforcements, but they would not arrive in time. Analysts on the news said the Varani homeworld might fall within days. Amy found Jake sitting in the dark, staring at his comm device. You are thinking about going back, she said. It was not a question. No, Jake said, but it sounded like a lie even to him. They need you. They made it clear what they think of me, of all humans. One person said that, Amy reminded him. One person who might be dying right now on her homeworld. Jake looked at his sister. Why do you care? You were never involved in any of this. Because you care, Amy said simply. I can see it eating you up. You left because you were hurt, but now you are hurt because you left. That is worse, she was right, and Jake hated that she was right. That night he received another message, but this time it was not from Lyra or Captain Court. It was from Tyle, the young Varani soldier Jake had saved 2 years ago. The message was simple. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, I hope you found the peace you were looking for. I wanted you to know that what you did for me mattered. When I was wounded and scared, you stayed with me. You told me I would be okay. You were right. I survived because of you. I'm on the homeworld now, helping with the evacuation. Whatever Commander Lyra said to you, please know that not all of us feel that way. You were never just a weapon to me. You were a hero. Thank you for everything. The message included a picture, Tell standing with a group of young Varani civilians, children he was helping evacuate. He was smiling, but Jake could see the fear in his eyes. Jake sat with that message for a long time. Then he received another one. And another. Within an hour, he had received 15 messages from different crew members on the horizon's edge. They were not begging him to return. They were just sharing memories. A Zinthari engineer named Cross wrote about how Jake had helped him repair the engines during a critical moment. A human medic named Sarah Lopez wrote about how Jake had always checked on the medical bay staff after battles. A Varani navigator named Senna wrote about how Jake had taught her a human card game during long night shifts. Each message was a small thing, a memory, a moment of kindness. But together they painted a picture that was different from the one Lyra had shown him. Maybe Lyra had been wrong. Or maybe she had been right about some in the coalition, but wrong about all of them. Jake stood up. He knew what he had to do, but not in the way Lyra would expect. He went to see Colonel Greg Hayes, who commanded New Haven's small defense force. Hayes was an older man, 50 years old with gray hair and a military bearing that never quite left. "I need to speak with you about forming a volunteer unit," Jake said. Hayes raised an eyebrow. "What kind of volunteer unit?" "The coalition is losing against the Kraith. They need help. But I am not going back as a coalition officer. If humans are going to fight, we fight as equals, as partners who choose to help, not as soldiers following orders." Hayes studied him. "You want to take volunteers into a war zone, independent of coalition command?" "Yes, sir." "That is crazy." Hayes was quiet for a moment. "Tell me more." They talked for 3 hours. Jake laid out his plan. They would call themselves the Free Companies, human volunteers who wanted to help the coalition, but who would operate independently. They would choose their own missions. They would make their own decisions. They would help because it was right, not because they were ordered to. "You think people will volunteer for this?" Hayes asked. "I think we should find out." Hayes approved the announcement. Jake stood in front of a camera the next day, his hands sweating. The broadcast would go out to all of New Haven and the surrounding colonies. "My name is Jake Morrison," he began. "I served in the coalition military for 8 years. I left because I was told that humans were nothing more than disposable weapons. I believed that for a while. I was angry and hurt, and I walked away." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But walking away is not the answer. The coalition is facing a terrible enemy. People are dying. Worlds are burning. They need help. But more importantly, there are people worth saving. Good people who have shown us kindness and respect. People who see us as equals." Jake looked directly at the camera. "I am forming a volunteer force to help the coalition. But we go as free humans, not as subordinates. We choose to fight because we believe it is right. We choose to help because it is what we do, not for glory, not for approval, but because when people need help, humans answer." He let that sit for a moment. "If you want to volunteer, come to the spaceport tomorrow morning. Bring whatever skills you have. We need pilots, engineers, medics, soldiers. We need people who are willing to stand up for what is right. We need people who understand that helping others is not weakness, it is strength." The broadcast ended. Jake sat back exhausted. He had no idea if anyone would show up. The next morning he walked to the spaceport at dawn. He expected maybe a few dozen volunteers, maybe 100 if he was lucky. There were 500 people waiting for him. They were not all soldiers. There were farmers and teachers and shopkeepers. There were old veterans and young students. Ben Carter was there with a toolkit, ready to help however he could. Lisa stood beside him. Amy was there too with her medical bag. Jake tried to tell her to go home, but she just shook her head. "You think I am letting you do this without proper medical support?" she said. "I am coming." Jake looked at all these people, these volunteers who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. They were here because they chose to be, because they wanted to help. "We might not survive this," Jake told them honestly. "The Kraith are strong. The coalition is losing. We might fly out there and die without making any difference." "Then we die trying," Ben said. Several others nodded in agreement. Jake felt something stir in his chest, something that had been dead since Lyra's words. Not hope exactly. Something stronger than hope, purpose. "All right," he said. "Let us get to work." They spent 2 days preparing. Merchant ships were converted into transport vessels. Cargo haulers were fitted with whatever weapons they could find. It was not a proper fleet. It was not even close. But it was what they had. Colonel Hayes provided what military support he could. Some weapons, some armor, some training for the volunteers who had never fought before. Jake organized them into units based on their skills. He taught them basic tactics. He explained what they would face. He gave them every chance to back out. No one did. On the 3rd day, the Free Companies were ready. 12 ships, 500 volunteers, and one simple mission: help the coalition defend the Varani homeworld. Jake stood on the bridge of their flagship, a converted freight hauler they had named the Defiant Hope. Amy stood beside him, looking nervous but determined. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Terrified," Jake admitted. "Good. That means you are smart." She squeezed his arm. "But we are doing the right thing." "I hope so." The ships launched together, forming up in a loose formation. They were not elegant like coalition vessels. They were rough and improvised. But they were flying, and they were going to help. As they jumped to faster-than-light speed, Jake thought about Lyra's words one last time. Disposable weapons, eager dogs, lives that are cheaper than ours. Maybe that was what some people thought. But it did not matter anymore. The free companies were not fighting to prove anything. They were fighting because people needed help and humans helped. It was that simple. The journey would take 3 days. 3 days to reach the Varani homeworld. 3 days to find out if they would make any difference at all. The free companies emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Varani system. What they saw made everyone on the bridge go silent. The Varani homeworld was surrounded by Kraith ships. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They swarmed around the planet like insects, their organic hulls pulsing with sickly light. In the distance, the burning wrecks of coalition ships drifted in the darkness. "Oh no," Amy whispered beside Jake. Jake activated the communications channel. "All ships, this is Morrison. Stay in formation and wait for my signal. Do not engage until I give the order." He switched to a different channel, one he hoped still worked. "Horizon's Edge, this is Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison of the Free Companies. We are here to help. Please respond." Static. Then a familiar voice, rough with exhaustion. "Morrison? Is that really you?" Captain Court sounded like he had not slept in days. "It is really me, sir. I brought friends. How many ships?" 12, sir. 500 volunteers." There was a long pause. "Jake, we are facing over 3,000 Kraith vessels. You should leave while you can." "Not happening, sir. Tell me where you need us." Another pause. Then Court's voice came back, and Jake could hear the relief in it. "The Kraith have siege engines on the planet's eastern continent. They are preparing to breach our final defensive line. If they break through, the planet falls. We cannot reach them without leaving our other positions vulnerable." Jake studied the tactical display. The siege engines were heavily defended. It would be a suicide run for any large force, but a small, fast group might be able to slip through. "We can handle it," Jake said. "Jake, those engines are protected by 200 Kraith ships. You have 12. Then we will have to be creative." Jake switched to the Free Company's channel. "All ships, listen up. We are going after the siege engines on the eastern continent. This will be dangerous. This will be messy. But we are not coalition military. We do not have to follow their playbook." He outlined his plan. It was risky. It involved using the Kraith's own tactics against them, drawing them out with feints and then hitting them hard where they did not expect it. "You are insane," Ben said over the comm. He was piloting one of the cargo haulers. "I like it." The Free Companies broke formation and dove toward the planet. The Kraith noticed them immediately. Dozens of organic ships peeled away from the main swarm to intercept. "Here they come," Jake said. "All ships execute pattern Delta." The human ships scattered in different directions, making themselves harder to target. The Kraith followed, confused by the unusual tactics. Coalition ships fought in neat formations. These humans flew like they were making it up as they went. Because they were, Jake's ship, the Defiant Hope, led a group of Kraith vessels away from the main force. Behind him, 3 other ships did the same. They were not fighting to win. They were fighting to create chaos. "Ben, now!" Jake shouted into the comm. Ben's cargo hauler, which the Kraith had ignored as not being a threat, suddenly accelerated toward the siege engines. 2 other haulers followed him. The Kraith scrambled to intercept, but they were out of position. Jake spun his ship around and dove back into the fight, targeting the Kraith ships trying to reach Ben. His weapons were not military grade, but they did not need to be. He was not trying to destroy the enemy. He was just trying to slow them down. "Amy, brace yourself," Jake yelled as a Kraith weapon hit their shields. Amy was strapped into a seat behind him, her knuckles white. "I hate space combat." "Everyone hates space combat," Jake replied, dodging another shot. Ben's hauler reached the siege engines. The cargo bay doors opened and dozens of improvised explosives tumbled out. They were not sophisticated. They were just fuel cells rigged to explode. But they worked. The siege engines erupted in flames. The explosion chain reacted through the Kraith defensive line, taking out dozens of organic ships in the process. Target destroyed. Ben whooped over the comm. Holy hell, it actually worked? But the victory came at a cost. 2 of the human ships had been destroyed in the fighting. 40 volunteers gone in a few seconds. Fall back. Jake ordered. Everyone, fall back to the horizon's edge. The remaining Free Company's ships retreated, the Kraith pursuing them. But now the Coalition fleet moved to cover them. The Horizon's Edge and her sister ships opened fire, driving the Kraith back. Jake docked the Defiant Hope in the Horizon's Edge's hangar bay. His hands were shaking. His head hurt. But they had done it. They had actually done it. Captain Court met him in the hangar. The Varani captain looked exhausted, but there was respect in his eyes. That was reckless, Court said. Yes, sir. It was also brilliant. Court clasped Jake's shoulder. Welcome back. I am not back, sir. The Free Companies are independent. We help because we choose to, not because we take orders. Court nodded slowly. I understand. And we are grateful for your choice. Over the next several hours, the tide of battle began to turn. The Free Companies kept hitting the Kraith in unexpected ways. They were too small to win big battles, but they were perfect for creating chaos and exploiting weaknesses. Ben turned out to have a talent for improvised weapons. He and his crew created bombs and traps from whatever materials they could find. Lisa coordinated evacuation efforts, helping get civilians off the planet. Amy worked in the medical bay, treating wounded from both the Coalition and the Free Companies. Jake moved between the ships, coordinating the human vessels with Coalition forces. Not as a subordinate, but as an equal partner, Captain Court consulted with him on tactics. Other Coalition officers started asking for the Free Companies by name. On the 3rd day of fighting, Jake finally saw Lyra. She was on the bridge of the Horizon's Edge, coordinating the defense of the southern continent. She looked thinner than Jake remembered, her silver skin dull with exhaustion. Their eyes met across the bridge. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lyra walked over to him. Jake tensed, not sure what to expect. You came back, Lyra said quietly. I came to help, Jake corrected. That is different, is it? Yes, I am not here because the Coalition ordered me to be. I am here because people needed help. That is what humans do. Lyra looked down. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I was wrong. What I said to you, it was wrong. Jake said nothing. I was grieving. I was angry. But that is no excuse. I said terrible things to you. Things that were not true. Or maybe they were true for some, but not for most of us. Not for me, not really. She looked up at him and Jake saw tears in her silver eyes. Varani rarely cried. I called you a disposable weapon, but in the past 3 days I have watched your people risk everything to help us. I watched humans die protecting a world that is not even theirs. I watched volunteers, people who had nothing to gain, throw themselves into danger because it was the right thing to do. Lyra's voice broke. You are not weapons. You never were. You are heroes, and I'm sorry I could not see that before. Jake felt the anger that he had carried for weeks start to fade. Not completely. The hurt was still there. But it was getting smaller. Thank you, he said. But I did not come back for an apology. I came back because it was the right thing to do. That is the only reason humans need. Lyra wiped her eyes. Then let me help you do the right thing. Tell me what you need. They worked together for the rest of the day, planning coordinated strikes against the Kraith. It was not like before. There was a distance now, a formality. But there was also respect. Real respect, earned and given freely. On the 5th day, Coalition reinforcements finally arrived. 3 full fleets jumped into the system. Their arrival timed perfectly with a coordinated attack by the Free Companies and the Horizon's Edge. The Kraith, unable to handle attacks from multiple directions, began to retreat. It was not a complete victory. The enemy would regroup and attack again. But for now, the Varani homeworld was safe. Jake stood in the hangar bay of the Defiant Hope, watching the last of the wounded being transferred to medical ships. They had lost 6 ships and 170 volunteers. Nearly a third of their force was gone, but they had saved a world. They had made a difference, and they had done it as free humans, not as disposable soldiers. Ben found him there, a bandage wrapped around his head from a close call during the fighting. What happens now? Ben asked. Now we go home, Jake said. We rest, we rebuild, and if someone needs help again, we answer, but on our terms. Sounds good to me. Ben smiled. Though I think I will stick to selling tools from now on. This fighting stuff is exhausting. Jake laughed. It felt good to laugh. Captain Court sent a formal message to the free companies that evening. The coalition wanted to recognize them as an independent allied force. They would not be part of the military. They would not take orders. But they would be partners, equals who chose to work together. Jake accepted the terms. This was what he had wanted. Respect not because humans begged for it, but because they earned it by being themselves. As the free companies prepared to leave, Lyra came to see Jake one last time. Lyra stood at the entrance to the Defiant Hope's hangar bay, looking uncertain. This was a side of her Jake had never seen before. Commander Lyra had always been confident, almost arrogant. Now she looked like someone who had lost something important and was not sure how to get it back. "Permission to come aboard?" she asked formally. Jake nodded. "Come in." She walked up the ramp slowly, her silver eyes taking in the ship. It was not like coalition vessels. Everything was improvised, patched together from whatever the colonists could find. But it had saved lives. It had made a difference. "I wanted to speak with you before you left," Lyra said. "All right." They stood there in silence for a moment. Outside, crews were loading supplies and preparing the free companies for departure. Jake could hear Ben shouting instructions to someone about proper cargo securing. He could hear Amy talking to one of the wounded volunteers, her voice calm and reassuring. "I removed my rank insignia," Lyra said suddenly. She held out her hand. The small metal symbols of her command sat in her palm. "I wanted you to see. I wanted you to understand that I am not speaking as Commander Lyra. I am speaking as just Lyra, the person who was your friend before I said those terrible things." Jake looked at the insignia, then at her face. "Why?" "Because everything I said to you that day in the armory I said from a position of authority. I used my rank to hurt you, to make you feel small. That was wrong." She closed her fist around the insignia. "But this apology is not from a commander to a soldier. It is from one person to another." She met his eyes directly. "I was wrong about humans. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about everything. And I am deeply, truly sorry." Jake had imagined this moment many times over the past weeks. He had imagined being angry, rejecting her apology, making her feel the way she made him feel. But now that it was happening, he just felt tired. "I accept your apology," he said, "but things cannot go back to the way they were." "I know," Lyra said quietly. "I broke something that cannot be easily fixed. Maybe it cannot be fixed at all." "Maybe," Jake agreed, "but maybe that is okay. Maybe things needed to break so they could be rebuilt better." Lyra looked at him with something like hope. "Better how?" "Before I was a coalition officer. I followed orders. I did what I was told because I thought that was how I earned respect. But respect that you have to earn by diminishing yourself is not real respect." Jake gestured to the ship around them, to the volunteers working outside. "The free companies do not follow orders. They choose to help. They choose to fight, and because of that, the respect they get is real. It is based on choice, not obligation." "You are saying humans will not serve in the coalition anymore?" Lyra asked. "I am saying humans will not serve under the coalition anymore. We will work with you as partners, as equals, not as soldiers who take orders, but as allies who make our own decisions." Lyra nodded slowly. "That is fair. That is more than fair. It is what should have been from the beginning." "Yes," Jake said. "It is." They stood in silence again, but this time it was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who understood each other better than they had before. "Will you ever come back to the horizon's edge?" Lyra asked. "Maybe, if we are working together on something, but I will not be rejoining the crew." Jake smiled slightly. "I have a new job now. Leading people who choose to be led. It is harder than taking orders, but it is better." "I believe that," Lyra said. She held out her hand. "Then let me say this. The free companies are always welcome in coalition space. You are allies. You are partners. And you are friends if you still want to be." Jake shook her hand. Her grip was firm, honest. "We will see. Friendship has to be rebuilt, just like respect." "Then I will work on rebuilding it," Lyra said. She put her rank insignia back on. "And when you need help, when humans need anything, you can call me. Not as a commander, but as a friend who owes you more than she can ever repay." "I will remember that," Jake said. Lyra left after that. Jake watched her walk back to the horizon's edge, her posture a little straighter than before. Maybe she had needed this as much as he did. Maybe they had both needed to break before they could become better. Amy found Jake a few minutes later. She had her medical bag packed and looked ready to go home. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Honestly, better than I have in weeks." "Good," Amy smiled. "You did the right thing coming here. Not for them. For you." "Maybe I did it for both," Jake said. "Maybe that is okay too." They boarded the Defiant Hope along with the rest of the crew. Ben was already at the controls, running through the pre-flight checklist. Lisa sat beside him looking relieved that the fighting was over. "Everyone ready?" Ben called out. A chorus of affirmatives came from throughout the ship. The free companies were ready to go home. As the ships began to launch, Jake stood at a window and looked back at the Varani homeworld. It was a beautiful planet, with blue oceans and green continents. Millions of people lived there, people who were alive because volunteers had chosen to help. "What are you thinking about?" Amy asked, coming to stand beside him. "I am thinking about what you said before I left New Haven, about walking away for the right reasons." "And did you?" "I walked away because I was hurt. That was not the right reason. But I came back for the right reason. I came back because people needed help and because I chose to give it." Jake looked at his sister. "That makes all the difference." The Defiant Hope jumped to faster than light speed, and the Varani homeworld disappeared behind them. The journey back to New Haven took 4 days. During that time, Jake met with all the volunteers. He thanked them personally. He listened to their stories. He mourned with those who had lost friends. Some of them wanted to stay with the free companies to be ready if they were needed again. Others wanted to go back to their normal lives. Jake told them both choices were fine. The free companies were not a military. People could come and go as they chose. When they finally arrived at New Haven, half the colony was waiting at the spaceport to welcome them home. There were cheers and tears and hugs. Families reunited, friends embraced. It was messy and emotional and perfect. Colonel Hayes met Jake at the landing platform. "You did good, Morrison." "We all did good, sir." The coalition sent a formal message. They want to establish a liaison office here on New Haven. They want to make sure communication with the free companies stays strong. Jake nodded. "That is acceptable, as long as they understand we are independent." "They understand," Hayes smiled. "I think you made that very clear." Over the next few weeks, life on New Haven slowly returned to normal. The volunteers went back to their jobs. Ben reopened his shop. Amy returned to her medical clinic. But something had changed. The colony felt different, stronger, more confident. Humans had proven something not just to the coalition but to themselves. They had proven that they did not need to follow others to matter. They could lead. They could choose. They could be partners, not subordinates. Jake kept the free companies together as a volunteer organization. They trained once a week just to stay sharp. They built better ships, better weapons, better equipment, not because they expected to fight again, but because they wanted to be ready if they were needed. He also kept the armor he had taken off in the armory of the Horizon's Edge. He had it shipped to New Haven and put it in storage. Sometimes he would go look at it, remembering the man who had worn it. That man had been a good soldier, but he had been serving for the wrong reasons. Jake was different now. He served because he chose to, not because someone told him to. That made all the difference. One evening, 6 months after the battle for the Varani homeworld, Jake received a message. It was from Tyle, the young Varani soldier. "Commander Morrison, I wanted you to know that the children I helped evacuate are safe. Their families are rebuilding their homes. Their planet survived because of you and your people." I tell them that story often. I tell them about the humans who came when no one ordered them to, who fought because it was right. I tell them that true strength is choosing to help others. Thank you for teaching me that lesson. Jake smiled and saved the message. It joined hundreds of others from people across coalition space. Messages of gratitude, messages of respect, messages that proved Lyra had been wrong. Humans were not disposable weapons. They never had been. They were people who chose to help others, who chose to stand up for what was right, who chose to be better than the worst things said about them. That evening, Jake had dinner with Amy, Ben, and Lisa. They talked about normal things. The weather, the harvest, plans for expanding the colony. No one mentioned the war or the fighting. That was in the past. But when dinner was over and everyone was leaving, Amy pulled Jake aside. "Are you happy?" she asked. Jake thought about it. He thought about the path that had brought him here. The hurt, the anger, the decision to walk away, the choice to come back. The lives saved, the respect earned. "Yes," he said. "I am happy. For the first time in years, I am genuinely happy." "Good," Amy said, hugging him. "You deserve it." That night, Jake stood on his balcony and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the coalition was rebuilding. The Kree threat was still real. There would be more battles, more challenges, more calls for help. And if those calls came, the free companies would answer, not because they had to, not because someone ordered them to, but because they chose to, because that was what humans did. They helped. They fought. They sacrificed. Not for approval or recognition or respect from others, but because it was right. Jake had set down his armor and walked away from a life where he was told his only value was his willingness to die. He had walked away from being a disposable weapon, and in doing so he had discovered something more important. He had discovered that humans did not need others to give them value. They had value because they chose to help, because they chose to be kind, because they chose to be strong in the ways that mattered. Lyra's cruel words had broken something inside him, but sometimes things needed to break before they could be rebuilt into something better. Jake Morrison had walked away, and then he had come back, not as a soldier following orders, but as a free human making his own choices. That made all the difference. The stars above him twinkled in the darkness, and Jake felt at peace. He had found his way home not just to a planet, but to himself. He had learned that respect earned by being yourself was the only respect worth having, and he had learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what diminishes you, so you can come back as something greater. The armor sat in storage, a reminder of who he had been. But Jake did not need it anymore. He had found a better armor, one made of choice and dignity and self-respect. And that armor could never be taken off. It could never be set down. Because it was part of who he was now, a human who chose his own path. A leader who served by choice. A person who proved that the greatest strength was not in fighting for others' approval, but in fighting for what you believed in. That was enough. It had always been enough. He just needed to walk away to see it.